Howdy ho.
All right, what's up, my homie?
Howdy boys.
It's like,
What are we doing today?
all right, so what do you guys think about us doing a little bit of a flashback into the past, a little 20th century tier listing?
Sounds good. I like flashing too. Let's do this.
Yes,
I like
sir.
flashing.
All right, let me pull this
Watch
up.
the stream.
Okay, so
Ooh.
I've got some seriously significant events from the 20th century that I think are very impactful and that we should rate on this tier list right here.
Okay, sounds fun.
Absolutely.
So Zeke, you wanna get us rolling with some World War II? No, World War One info.
World War One info. All right. So yeah, front end of the 20th century, right at the beginning. That's what that means. There was a lot of new technology in this time, like tons and tons of new guns, airplanes, and tanks. Nothing anybody had ever seen before. And on top of that, after the war was actually finished, tons and tons of economic issues like the Great Depression and just general problems everywhere, like a heavily weakened Eastern Europe, especially. All of that together, plus instating Hitler into power, indirectly led to World War II, which is why I believe it's S tier. Convince me otherwise.
Okay. I think that's an interesting point. Personally, I would put that up as A tier because it is
I would also
very
go with
important.
that.
I agree. We wouldn't have had World War II without it. You're right. But like, come on now. It's World War One. We could survive without it. Consider the other things we have on this list. We've got Marilyn Monroe. We've got
Zeke, let me present this to you. In World War II, there were 75 million casualties. By putting World War One in S
No,
tier,
hold up, buddy.
are we degrading World War II in some way?
We can degrade that later. What do we put in this one at?
I would vote A tier. Should we put it to a vote?
This
Now
an
let's put
A.
it to a vote. I'm going S tier, obviously.
All right. Well,
I'm
it looks
going A
like it might
tier.
be 2-1 on this one, so
That's a
we'll put
bummer.
it at a high A tier.
High A tier.
All right. So, speaking of war, I noticed you mentioned Hitler. So next up on the list, we've got Hitler. He had a very significant impact on the 20th century and his time. Around 1939 is when he started World War II. So that is like a big no-no. Starting World War II, I mean, you've got to be a pretty bad guy to do that, right? Along with that, he spread Nazi control over Europe. He started the Nazi Party and had that completely take over several countries within the world. Within the world, bro. I'm so tired after today. Just let me process this. Okay. Anyways, and yeah, overall, he had just a super negative impact on the 20th century overall. With the combination of Jews, hate against Jews, and spreading Nazi control over Europe, and starting World War II. I believe that Hitler makes a solid S tier on this list.
A
For
solid S
for
tier.
for the sake of my argument before, I'm still gonna like insist that World War II is A tier, or at least behind World War One. But clearly,
Okay.
clearly, I don't have majority power here, so.
Well, I'm willing to shift my opinion just because I do feel as though World War One, being the war itself, holds a greater impact in a way as to opposed to the one man.
What if we put both world wars at S tier? But we for the sake of the deal and my argument here, we can put World War II above World War One.
Joe, what do you think about that?
I think that's a fair compromise.
3%
Okay,
equity
let's
stake.
go for it. There we go. Let's get these guys on S tier. Okay,
Handsome gentleman.
so starting off strong. Joe, do you want to talk about the space race?
Oh yeah, the space race was pretty cool. So it was a 20th century competition between the US and Soviet Union. Both were racing to be the first in outer space. Russia started off strong, putting Sputnik into space, and that was a real huge threat to the US in their eyes. But soon after that, they sent Yuri God, I'm not even gonna pretend I can pronounce that name into space. First cosmonaut, and he got some awards, and then Kennedy said, "Hey, let's put a man on the moon." Earth then set out to put that down and accomplished it. But overall, both countries did not start any Star Wars, as they would have called it, and there
Clever.
were high tensions.
Interesting.
That
So,
that does
what
sound
do you,
pretty
what do you feel?
important.
What do you feel that fits?
I feel that fits right into like A tier because the amount of technology that was produced during that, I fully believe there's weapons in space right now.
To fight all those
Definitely.
aliens we see.
That's true. That's true. I I would put that at a B tier personally.
I'm going B as
Just
well.
okay.
Yeah.
And we can
Joe,
always
are
we
you
can
willing to
always
be?
change it later if we really really have to. But
I would go B for now, but if we need to change it later, I'm
yeah,
willing to do
if we
so.
need to change it later, C is always an option.
All right. That's crazy. All right. So we'll put this in a strong B tier. Put Space Race in a strong B tier. Okay. So now we've got to move on to look at this, Steve Jobs. I
Stevie
wonder
boy.
who has this one. Okay, so I will be leading a little bit of information as to why Steve Jobs is a very significant figure in the 20th century. So, Steve
Let's hear
Jobs
it.
actually founded Apple in 1976. And then in 1986, he acquired Pixar. So already straight
I
off the
didn't
bat,
even
we
know
have
that. That's
two
crazy, actually.
yeah, they have two extremely massive companies that he started that have had like massive impacts on the world that we have today.
XXL.
And um, so not only did he acquire Apple and Pixar, but through his company in Apple, he developed the iPhone in 2007, which led to the smartphone discovery and like the world that we have today revolving around our smartphones and social media and the way we really communicate with each other today.
They also
So,
just like really really
did
expanded upon like the general home computer experience back in the day. Isn't
absolutely.
like the
So,
isn't like Windows based off of something they did?
yeah, so
Yeah.
Apple actually originally created the user interface system that we have today. Without Apple, with their like really creative computer design back in the day,
Ingenuity.
we would not have the like home use user interface that we have today. So,
Right.
in my opinion, with the way that he basically built the society we have today, with through like communication and the way we interact with each other, I would put this at a strong A tier.
Yeah, I
You
would,
gotta also realize that we're talking about the 20th century here, not today's world.
but
Well,
the 20th
absolutely.
century shaped today's world, so it's an important thing to consider.
So,
I
what
would
are we
say
thinking?
I would say a low to high, sorry, low A tier to high B tier.
Okay, okay. Joe?
Um, I'd go low A tier, low B tier.
Okay. So, are we good with an A tier right now and then possibly some adjustment later?
Yeah,
Yeah.
All right. So, Steve Jobs goes into a low A tier to high B tier. The moment. Okay. So, moving on, we've got Elvis Presley. Who's handling this guy?
little Elvista Presley. Yeah, he was a guy from the 20th century. Anyways,
Oh,
he
really?
he revolutionized modern music just through his general tone and performance styles. The way we have performances today, just a lot came from his unique style. It was unique at the time. It's still unique today. And in general, this is a really cool thing to look back on. On top of that,
Hmm.
he was a pretty global sensation and sort of a beacon of American culture, both in his movies and his music. He, yeah, while he shaped a lot of the American culture, he also broadcasted that to the world, and that was a really cool thing. Now, like in the very, very broad scope of things and of the 20th century, he probably wasn't that important. So I would put him at a C tier, low C tier.
You know, I actually agree with that. I was gonna say C tier. I think
Yeah, I
that he
was
was
gonna say C
impactful.
tier as well. He wasn't as impactful as all the other stuff he
Yeah,
put
no,
up
he
yet.
wasn't terribly impactful, but he was very like he was important to especially
Yeah,
American culture.
absolutely very important.
Yeah.
Okay,
And
Elvis Presley. Okay, so Elvis Presley gets a strong C tier. And next up, we will be moving on to aeroplanes.
Yes.
aeroplane.
Okay. As you may know, they were created in the 20th century, early 20th century, by the Wright brothers. They made the Wright Flyer. Now they had been obsessed with airplane, well, flight from a very young age. And then when they had grown up, they were bike mechanics, and they started working on flight, and they studied aerodynamics and all that. So on December 17th, 1903, they got a plane essentially to lift off the ground for 12 seconds. So then a bunch of revolutionaries and visionaries came around and was just like, hey, what if we expanded on their idea? And then they surpassed the Wright brothers and made a bunch of different kind of flying machines. And that revolutionized travel, military vehicles, and honestly, it just changed the world.
Definitely made transportation a heck of a lot easier.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Considering where we put the space race at a B tier, I would put this maybe next to that.
Yeah, I would
I
put
would
it in
put
front of
that
Space
low
Race.
B in front of
Okay.
Space
I'll
Race
put it
or
in front of
behind?
Space Race. Because like
I kind of agree
okay,
with both.
let's be real. When was the last time we went to the moon?
That is real.
Going to go very soon, but that's not 20th
Yeah,
century.
but see that hasn't happened yet. So
Yeah, okay, I'll agree with it right now.
So aeroplanes, the invention of airplanes goes into a strong B tier. Okay. So
cool beans.
next up, we've got Albert Einstein. Let's talk about that feller.
My G Alberto. He made a lot of
Yeah.
contributions to the world of physics, like his E equals mc squared equation, which has
Oh, I
been
know
used
that
by a
one.
lot of smart people. And he won a Nobel Prize for his study in like electro something or other.
Oh.
It was
Oh,
pretty important.
wow.
Electro something or other. It's a pretty in depth field of science.
Yeah, I'm
It
sure
was
there's a
very
lot of
impressive.
information on it.
Stuff that I'm very familiar with, you know. And on top of that, he had a very creative way of thinking. Because like you can think to ask these certain questions only because other people have asked these questions. It takes a different mind
Mm,
to be able to actually express these questions and come up with them on your own. But the hard thing
right.
though, and I'll need your guys' help for this, is I don't know where to place him. Because yeah, he definitely changed a lot of what we understand about the universe today.
So speaking in the grand scheme of things and the amount of things and important events and people we have on this list, and the way we're scaling it so far, I think that with his discoveries and the fact that he won a Nobel Prize and he had an impactful effect on society,
Wait,
um, it
is it safe to say he ranks above Elvis?
I think that's safe.
In terms of impact.
Given.
I think we put him in front of Elvis on C tier.
Yeah, I'm okay with
Yeah.
either high C tier or low B tier.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, and I say that because there are so many like physical impacts that these like other events have had on the world. Like I mean, look at World War One. That was a there were so many things that happened there. Look at the space race. It's all like physical events that have like um changed a lot of the way we view things today. Meanwhile, like Albert Einstein had effects that people wouldn't be able to list off the top of their head. Like a lot of these people know about because of how impactful
It
they are
was
in the world.
knowledgeable
Yeah, yeah.
effects, not very physical.
Like
Exactly.
even the stuff that I was saying is like hard stuff to remember. Like in terms, like I couldn't remember the word for what he the Nobel Prize he won.
Right.
And
Exactly.
like I think most people can tell you that like Germany was involved in World War One. So
Hopefully.
Yeah,
hopefully,
Um.
he played a
yeah.
part of it.
So yeah,
Okay.
high C tier sounds
So
good.
yeah, we'll put Albert Einstein at a high C tier if it'll let me. Okay. So next up, we actually have for this Marilyn Monroe looking image down here, we've got the Hollywood Golden Age. Um,
The look and
okay,
image. That's not her.
Yeah, that's like
it's not
Marilyn
very.
Monroe.
It's a, I actually dressed up and took that photo just for this. Um, so
Sorry.
moving into the Hollywood Golden Age, this is, in my opinion, one of like the biggest um, and most significant events in terms of the 20th century and things that affected our society in the entertainment industry specifically. And so It started with big industries basically coming together and forming brands that and movie studios that came together and started just producing, mass producing amazing films, hiring great actors that really just went off and created pieces of art that we can think of today. Like frick, I didn't have one written down. Uh, big movies. Uh, oh,
Elvis had a
Citizen
couple.
Kane. That was the one. That was the one. Okay, hold on. Let me restart. Okay. And so really, it produced movies such as Citizen Kane, which are pieces of art that we can look back on today and be like, wow, that was a great movie, you know? And
I've
so,
definitely had that thought.
yeah, me too. And so, an example of a star that was born that like a lot of people know of is an obvious one is Marilyn Monroe. She was a really famous actress back in the day that took part in a lot of movies at the time. And so, some of the best work in movies were done from the early 20s through the 60s. Um, and if you look back, you can see that movies were produced in the 20s and the 1920s through the 1930s. More movies were produced than ever recorded, even by today's standards, with the amount of movies that studios are pumping out every year. It doesn't compare to the 1920s and 30s when Hollywood was first, like, kind of almost, you could argue that they were peaking, but their biggest peak was in the early 60s. And so, with all of that provided, and the way that it's kind of shaped the way movies are shot today, and all the progression we have, and how I'm sure we all watch TV shows and movies on a regular basis. And
Uh-huh.
so, um, considering that, and that it's still ran by Hollywood today, uh, and that this is like a common thing in our society, um, I would rank this at a low C tier, almost to a D tier actually for this one.
I would put it at B actually.
Really?
At back end B, back end B. I mean, it's definitely more significant than Elvis because he had a pretty big like piece of that cake, metaphorically, of
Okay.
course. He didn't produce them, but he was in a lot of movies. Some of his most famous songs, like Jailhouse Rock, were based off of movies, and like that's what he did for a lot of it. And like the
Right, that's a good
significance that it
point.
had on the American culture back in the day made like America the entertainment capital of the world. It's a
Right.
really big impact, and that just like I'm confident. I don't know the actual statistics, but I'm pretty sure that a large portion of America's economy relies on the entertainment industry, which
Right.
was which is also heavily reliant on Hollywood. That's why I would probably put it at a low B.
So would you put it
Low
above
B, sorry,
Einstein too?
low B,
Little B tier?
low B tier.
I would argue I would say high C maybe. Yeah, because I definitely
No,
agree
but we
with
can't
Joel.
do high C because high C is a drink, and that's a different thing. That's a different part of this list. That was a
Um,
stupid joke. I'm sorry, guys.
uh,
Oh wow, you're a jerk. All right, fine. You guys do what you want with it. It's not even my thing, anyways.
Joe, what do you think?
I would say I see.
Okay,
Yeah,
then let's put it at a high C. Room for movement later. So yeah, the Hollywood Golden Age goes above Elvis and Albert Einstein as a high C. Okay, so next up we have the founding of Amazon, and with a little picture of Jeff Bezos.
I'm gonna go ahead and say this one was very hard to write on. There's not much information on it. But Amazon was founded on July 5th, 1994. It was initially named Cadabra.
it
Um,
was a bookstore, wasn't it?
it was a bookstore, yeah. The vision was for it to be the largest online bookstore the world has ever seen.
Guys, can we just get a
But
she for that?
Sheesh.
later in time. it was named Amazon, and then it started opening up its horizon to new commerce and new items to sell. Before, when it was in Jeff Bezos's garage when it started, and he continued to run it out of his garage and sell books to people's doorsteps, delivering to 45 of all 50 states worldwide, like
Like
in America.
he would personally deliver them?
He would deliver them using, oh, companies, man. I didn't do that.
Probably just like FedEx or US Mail, I would guess. That's still
UPS,
crazy
something like
though.
that.
Like a lot of
Yeah.
eBay shops
Still
today
running
kind of
out
run
of
like
his
that.
garage is crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so where do we want to put that?
But now it's the largest e-commerce thing on the
That yeah,
planet. So.
it's just just like a medium sized company. If I just does not have a footprint in like hardly any countries.
Oh
Real.
yeah, so like he's one of the most rich people on the planet. So if you want to argue that it's a medium-sized company, go ahead with your how much money do you have, Zeke?
By a lot. I mean, I run an international drug cartel. You can suck an egg. No, I
Yeah.
didn't.
Anyways, so I would rank this D tier.
It's a pretty big company.
D tier?
Yeah,
Colin,
I'm the Simon Cowell.
Colin, I know for a fact you ordered something. I know for a fact you ordered something from Amazon in like in the last week.
I did order something from Amazon in the last week.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. S tier.
21 pilots. Yo, crap.
I would say high B tier. I don't know if it quite deserves A. Definitely high B.
It is huge in today's society. So I would also say high B.
Okay. It seems like we're gonna put the founding of Amazon at a high B tier.
That's not a high B tier. That's a
Again, I thought I could get away with that.
I told you you're dyslexic.
Anyways. No,
Something about you holding that book upside down was a hint, hint.
we don't need to talk about that, Zeke.
All right, this looks like a video game, like an Atari.
All right. Right. So this is actually the invention of video games, which was a very significant.
Oh,
Which
guys,
had
I can do that.
What?
okay, which
That was
guys,
a
okay,
productive,
on
that was a
topic.
productive use of time.
um
Wait, no? Forget I said anything.
topic on topic on topic. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Yeah.
the invention. So, much like the Hollywood Golden Age, the invention of video games was extremely impactful in terms of the entertainment industry and how it affected the way people entertain themselves today. So, with the invention of video games, originally back in 1972, Atari was one of the first companies that started up with working on video games with the invention of Pong. And so, Pong was a kind of the first massive hit in terms of video games, which kind of shined a light into what the future could hold. But there really wasn't any household audience yet. And then in the upcoming years, they kind of built towards that, starting with arcades, but it still wasn't in kind of a comfortable living space that you could like bring it back home and use it like hours a day. It'd be something you have to plan for. But then when Nintendo came out as kind of a competitor to Atari, they came out with the original Nintendo Entertainment System, the NES, which actually which kind of crossed that boundary.
You
And
skipped over like
uh,
a lot of consoles in between there, but yeah, NES is probably
I-
like the only recognizable one there.
yeah,
Isn't the NES still used today?
Not
yeah,
really.
absolutely.
Not in most
And-
practical cases, I wouldn't say.
well, the company that made it, Nintendo, has branched out and continued to kind of create.
Nintendo.
Shut up.
Shut up.
Someone is not a Nintendo fan. Okay, so. Um, but basically, Nintendo made that big step crossing into the bringing consoles into the home boundary, which kind of opened up the gate of making it like something that is just a regular part of your day, a part of your society, something that
Yeah,
you could go to
absolutely.
someone's house and be like, oh yeah, they have a Nintendo, they have a console, they play video games. And so and this resulted in the industry that we have today, which is a multi-billion-dollar company. Nintendo by itself is a multi-billion-dollar company. Okay, well that being said, I'm gonna stick to my A tier, maybe behind Steve Jobs.
Nah, I'd put it low B tier.
I'm putting no. Well, okay.
Really?
Consider one more thing. Video games are probably the pinnacle of modern art in terms like okay when people think back to this generation and like in terms of artwork especially what came out of it, a lot of people are going to be looking towards video games.
That is true.
That's just one thing I'm
Well,
thinking about there. So that would probably immediately push it all the way through C, and
Right.
it's somewhere in B or maybe low A.
I think it's low B because you gotta put it into perspective. You're saying the entire space initiative was less than video games.
Yeah,
Well, that was a single event. This is an impact on society that has lasted over like decades.
it's a pretty important piece to like pop culture, not just in America, but like across the entire world. Like the biggest companies are actually Japanese, and the influence
Right.
from like especially American and Japanese markets has spread over the entire world, and it's just a global thing now. Development
Right.
studios everywhere creating their own games and stories for people to experience. I think it's a really
I
cool
think
thing
I'm
that
I'm
only our
willing.
generation is going to get to experience. Really,
Yeah, and I'm willing to compromise for a high B above Jeff
I'd be
Bezos.
willing to
Um,
go to high B.
yeah,
okay.
we can put it around the airplane. I would say.
Okay.
I'd
So
say
is this
I'd
here?
say below Jeff Bezos, but above the airplane.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. So we've got the invention of video games, and a mid to high tier B. Um, and I think that finalizes our set of significant events and people from the 20th century.
yeah, looks
Okay.
good to me.
That's
All right, so a final little summary of how we've ranked everything so far. And starting in the D tier range, we have absolutely nothing because our events are so
mhm.
cool they don't get D's.
Real.
Yeah.
And then moving up
Everything's
to
in
C, we've got the Hollywood Golden Age. And then we've got Albert Einstein and Elvis Presley. Reverse that because I said it in the wrong order. But those are
Mhm.
our C tier decisions. Moving up to B tier, we've got the space race. Then we've got the invention of the airplane. Then we have the invention of video games. Then we have the founding of Amazon. Those are B tier decisions. Moving up to the only A tier decision, we have Steve Jobs, the man himself, the myth, the legend. And then finally for S tier, we've got World War One and Hitler.
Mhm.
What a cool list we made here.
This
Yo.
is a very cool
Let's
list.
buy it. Yeah.
Alright,
Loser.
Chatty
thank you
Joe.
for doing editing, Zeke. I love you. Mwah.